This is a really fast and really durable 3D printed drone that's based on Betafpv's new Matrix 5-in-1 flight controller. All the parts are in the description. First, we're going to install the flight controller gummies. You can use a screwdriver or a tweezer to help push them through. Just poke them through the hole and try to avoid stabbing them. Also, make sure they're level. Next, we're going to prep the solder pads. Get some good rosin core solder and tin the pads. Tin your motor leads and then solder them down. My motor wires are already tinned and prepped since I took them from another build. Now on to the power leads. The negative terminal is going to be particularly difficult since it has a higher thermal mass. Thread the wires through the holes and apply some flux. Angle your soldering iron so that it's touching both the wire and the pad. This is very important, especially for the negative wire. Look closely at the pad and make sure the solder is flowing. If it's not, then add a little bit more solder and add some flux as well. You'll notice the positive connector is a bit easier to solder down. That's normal. Once you're done soldering, be sure to check the strength of the connection. Just wiggle it around a little bit and make sure it's not loose. If it's loose or partially connected, then that can cause sparks, it can cause VTX brownouts, or a complete loss of power. For the camera connector, we're going to tin the pads, apply some flux. For this camera connector, it's actually kind of difficult, so make sure you reorient the board in a way that makes sense. Otherwise, you might end up melting the connector that's right next to it. So just be sure you've got a good angle and don't melt the connector. Now you want to clean all that flux off the board. It makes it easier to inspect your work, and if you leave flux on the board, then it attracts dirt and debris and it can cause shorts later on. Just get some alcohol and a Q-tip and roll it across the board. Don't scrub. You want to roll it and tap. If you start scrubbing, then the Q-tip can get stuck and sometimes it'll pull the smaller capacitors and smaller resistors off the PCB. You want to clean it gently. Now get all the 3D printed parts and start installing the screws onto the frame. You need countersunk screws, and the screw needs to be about 8mm long. Install the battery slings facing the back of the frame, install the front battery sling through the frame. Also be sure to install the washers on the sides of the frame. This helps keep the flight controller leveled. Screw down the flight controller and the motors. I'm using metal screws with plastic nuts to save weight. Nylon screws would work, but you just gotta be sure not to be overly aggressive with a drone because those screws can snap and the battery can go flying. Remember, the screws need to be countersunk, otherwise the head of the screw can stab the battery. The battery slings actually have a little flap on them to help prevent the battery from getting stabbed by the screw if the screw ever comes loose. Next is the camera mounts. Choose one that matches the length of your camera lens and install it. Route the camera connector to the right and pull the tab around and slot the tab into place. You can use some tweezers to make this a bit easier for yourself. Then just snap the camera mount onto the frame. It has two little ears that should catch on the inside of the TPU mount, and it just snaps into place. Run the antenna through a hole in the frame and connect it to the UFL port. You also want to tie the antennas down, as well as all the motor wires. That way they don't get caught in the props so they don't get ripped off when you crash. Now install the props onto your drone. I like to use props out since that works a little bit better for an open prop design like this. Keep in mind, this drone is pretty high performance for its size, and it's not really meant for indoor use. As you can see, it's hovering at like 10% throttle. This makes it very difficult to fly indoors. I was flying it outside and I managed to damage the camera, but that's a pretty easy fix. You just unscrew the camera and then screw it back down using the goggles view as your reference to make sure it's not blurry. And then just use some adhesive to fix the camera back down in place. That's the end for this video. I'll have more in the future. Thanks for watching.